Hey everybody, and welcome to another Chairman of the Board ranking video. This is where I take a look at the last 5 new to me board games that I've played, and I rank and review them in order of preference. Now before I get started on these 5 games, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor Kienda.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 5, I have Tem-Purr-A. Now this is a pretty strange hybrid push your luck shedding card game where, unlike most shedding games, you are not trying to get rid of your cards first, you are trying to stay in the round as long as you can. Now the shedding part of the game is really simple, where you are trying to match the last card played. So if someone plays a 4, then you're going to keep on playing 4s until somebody can't. If you're really stuck, then you can play 2 of another number and change the number to that. So for example, if I play 2 5s, then everyone is trying to play 5s. There are also some bonus cards that can kind of force you to pick up more cards later or change the turn order, you know, that kind of thing. Now the way this game differs to most other card games is that when somebody cannot match the last card played, then you're going to be forced to pick up cards. And you're going to pick up cards based on the previous played one. So say, for example, there was a stack of 4 number 3 cards. It would be 3 times 4, and therefore that player would have to draw 12 cards from the deck. And when you're drawing these cards, it's not only a good thing because, of course, you can restock your hand to stay in the round longer, but scattered throughout that deck, there are these indigestion cards that will force the player to go bust and lose that round. And I think it's the first player to go bust 3 times that loses the game, and the winner of the game will be the player who has got the fewest indigestion cards. Now, it's quite a cool concept. I actually quite like the idea of it, that idea of, you know, that walking that tightrope of trying to draw cards to keep your hand topped up but not drawing too many. Kind of like that ticking time bomb mechanism where you're thinning that deck out, making it more likely that the next person will draw an indigestion card. But I think this game does have some pretty clunky flaws, and that is because there's sometimes such a huge incentive just to draw that many cards simply to top your hand up. So say, for example, if someone is playing lots of high value cards and the pile builds up loads, you know, you might have, say, 8 cards on the stack and there's a value 5. Therefore, that player is drawing 40 cards if they want to take those. Yes, you're almost guaranteed to go bust, but you keep your hand for the next round, meaning that you're in such a strong position that it's often worth doing it. And although I'm not going to say the game is broken, it kind of feels like the game goes off the rails a bit too much and becomes a bit too chaotic and almost silly in a bad way. Now, I think this game could have easily been fixed by either when you draw a indigestion card, you stop top decking from that point. So maybe, you know, you are really pushing your luck that way, and if you're gonna benefit by getting such a huge overspill, then that's not going to be the case just by that small rules change. Additionally, as the game goes on through the rounds, more of these indigestion cards are added to the deck. And unfortunately, the rulebook says that as soon as you draw 1 indigestion card, or whether you draw 1 or more, you still only count as like kind of 1 loss for the round. Whereas if you ended up drawing more than 1, I think that you should get a penalty for each one of those indigestion cards that you draw. Therefore, again, you haven't got such a huge incentive just to take so many cards at once. So again, it just feels a little bit messy. It could have done with a little bit more refinement. You know, maybe I'm missing something there because, you know, this game will kind of auto-balance itself. But again, it just feels like it goes way too askew, and it just feels, again, messy and untidy, and it could have done with some reining in. So can't really recommend this one, despite me liking the concept of it. That is Tempura at number 5. At number 4, I have Motor City. So this is from the Roll and Write or Draft and Write series of games by Riddle and Pinchback. This game also has a third designer who I can't quite remember his name, so sorry about that. So this is from the same line of, you know, Fleet the Dice game, Three Sisters, and I have played Fleet and I quite like it. I still have it in my collection. I didn't manage to play Three Sisters, but I must admit that one didn't quite grab me. I thought it looked too similar to the original Fleet the Dice game. Now this one, Motor City, looked a bit different, and I do quite like the idea of this one, you know, manufacturing cars and stuff. in practice, this is very themeless. It's definitely a spreadsheet style of game. It has all the trappings you'd expect with a roll and write. Now, this one's more of a draft and write, although it is using dice. And you're drafting these bespoke dice based on obviously the symbols on the dice, but also where they're sitting on this grid to get some bonus actions. And then, of course, you're climbing tracks, you're ticking things off to get bonuses, unlocking things for endgame scoring, all the combos and things you'd come to expect from a typical roll and write style game. Now, I must admit, I think these guys do a great job of these styles of games. They know what they're doing. Everything works as it should. I think with this one, I'm not a huge fan of the graphic design. It looks a little bit too spreadsheet-ish to me. It looks a little bit homemade, which I thought, I don't know, took me out of it a little bit. I didn't like the visual appeal. But the gameplay is solid. It definitely has those satisfying turns, and you can't really do everything. So each game is going to feel a little bit different based on the dice available, and you're going to have to, use some tactical decisions rather than going in with a set game plan, because of course you are subject to the dice that are rolled. And all in all, I think this game is solid, as you'd expect, albeit maybe a little bit forgettable. I think this line of games is maybe just a smidge above my preferred weight level when it comes to roll or draft and write style games. I tend to like them being a bit smaller and more compact, shorter as well. This one, you are looking at around 45 minutes to play it. I'm not saying it outstays its welcome, but I think maybe there's a mental block when I see a roll and write game and it's that long. I kind of tend to like them in the 20-minute mark, with a unique mechanism or twist or two, whereas this one is definitely heads down in your sheet, trying to min-max everything, which is completely fine. Again, I'm not criticizing the game. It's just that I prefer mine to be a little bit lighter in general. And if I'm looking towards a 45-minute game, I probably want to play something with a little bit more to it. So it's a solid one. Again, I think it's a bit forgettable, but I have only played it once or twice, so it's take that for what it's worth. But it's good. There's nothing more I can say. I think it's going to fade into obscurity because I think it lacks a certain something. It lacks something special and unique about it. But if you find a second-hand copy or a cheap copy on the market and you like this genre of games, I think you're going to get some enjoyment out of Motor City. At number 3, I have Flatiron. So this is a 2-player only game, and it's somewhat a worker movement game where you are moving around these 5 different spots on this main board as well as a sideboard, and as long as you are on the spot, the other player cannot go there. And when you're going to these different locations, you are doing kind of one of 3 actions. Number 1 is to buy a card in that region, and when you buy that card, you're going to tuck it under your own personal player board, which means that when you go to a certain location again in the future, it comes with another benefit. So it has this degree of engine building. Another thing you can do is you can actually activate your abilities assigned to that location based on the cards you previously drafted, as well as the inbuilt ones on your player board. And the third option you can do is simply to gain money. Now, the premise of this game and the idea is that you are building the famous Flatiron building in New York. And this one, you do that by buying and then placing these columns, and each floor of the Flatiron building needs 3 columns, and generally speaking, they need to be different colours each time. So if I build the blue column, then my opponent cannot build the blue column this turn, or I cannot build another one. But of course, as you'd expect, those cards that you're drafting and increasing your player board's abilities with will let you break some rules. So maybe it will say you can duplicate a column, or you can buy columns for cheaper. You can maybe increase your income each time you go to a region, because money in this game is pretty tight, and you might want to focus on building up that economy so that you are more efficient on gaining money, so you're not wasting turns each time you go somewhere. But at the same time, each location on your player board can only ever hold 3 cards. And this is actually an interesting little facet of the game where, generally speaking, the more powerful engine building cards will come with either a thumbs up or a thumbs down rating. You know, the more powerful they are, normally comes with a thumbs down rating, and the weaker version will come with a thumbs up rating. And at the end of the game, if you have more thumbs up than thumbs down on each location, then you'll gain some points, but if you have more thumbs down, then you'll lose some end game points, which is obviously quite important. There is a separate location you can go to as well, where you can spend quite a bit of money to get these end game scoring cards, which of course will get you things such as, you know, this will get you X amount of points for each column of this colour in the Flatiron building, and so on. And the framework of the game is actually rather simple. Again, just move somewhere and take the action. But it's those extra wrinkles that make it quite interesting. You know, not only the engine building and tailoring it to what you want. You know, do you want to go all in on one location? Do you want to spread yourself thinner? Mixed with that card system of a thumbs up and thumbs down. And on top of that, each time you build a new floor on the Flatiron building, there's going to be like a new rule in play that will kind of change things. So maybe it will say, might be something simple like when you go to this location, you get an extra coin. Or this particular round, you can have the same coloured column in each floor. Or there's even one that says you can now share locations with somebody else. So all these things kind of just add a bit more flavour to a pretty simple game. And I do like the fact that this game feels different to a lot of other two-player games. You know, most two-player games fit a certain vibe, a certain feeling where, you know, you have that head-to-head kind of tug-of-war feeling. This one feels more like a traditional Euro, I suppose, but it is very tight and compact. Pretty quick as well. You're looking at around 45 minutes to play this one. And I think it does walk that fine line between being a filler style game, but having enough meat on the bones to feel like you've played a full game by the end of it. So I think this one could do quite well. If more people knew about it. I think it didn't really gain much momentum or gain the wind under its sails last year, but it could be a slow burner because I think this is actually a solid design, and I'm looking forward to playing it some more and seeing how those combos of those cards come together. So that is Flatiron at number 3. At number 2, I have A Message from the Stars, which is a fascinating deduction game that's going to be harder to explain, I think, verbally, than if you were to see it played in person. But this is a cooperative game, at least the way I've played it. I've only played this at 3 players. I'm not sure if there are different modes, but in a 3-player game you do work together, albeit you are on different teams. So essentially you are trying to work out the numbered value assigned to different letters in the alphabet in a somewhat mastermind style way. So essentially one side of the team is going to be providing words to the other player, then that player is going to give a numbered value back. And so some of these letters are worth, say, 1 point each. Some of them are doublers, so they will double the value of those, or of the letters that are worth points in that word. And I think some of them even turn it into like a negative value. And of course, you know, if you provided this word, your teammate will give you the numbered value back, and you're trying to deduce what each letter could be, filtering letters out as you go. If one letter is worked out, then you know it's not going to apply to the other categories. And yeah, essentially you're trying to work out what letters are worth points, what letters are worth double, and what letters are worth negative. But there are some kind of subcategories that can help you work things out further. So for example, some letters are red, but there can only be up to like a maximum of 1 or 2 red letters amongst all the letters in the game. So if you worked out these 2 red letters, then you know that all the other ones can't be red, so that's more things you can tick off on your sheet. So it does become quite a crunchy game, especially considering how few turns you get. You know, this is a very fast game. It's only like 8 turns or something, so you have very little slack to make mistakes, and you need to be making sure that you're punching straight through to the crux of those letters and squeezing as much information out of each word that you can. On top of that, you don't quite have the free will to give any words you want, because the other player is trying to guess some of these words on this other sheet that the other team can see. So it almost works like a game like Decrypto, if you're familiar with that, where you're trying to give clues all associated to another word. And basically at the end of the game, you're going to get points based on all the correct answers you've given, based on again, those letters that are worth numbers, those letters that are worth doubles, the negative letters, as well as the correct words that the other player has guessed from the clues that you're given. So although it might sound like a mess, and it's actually like a hybrid of several different deduction games. You know, this game reminds me of a game called Decrypto. It reminds me of a game called Hooky, but it's actually a more refined version of all of them, despite my mess in explaining how it works. I think a big part of that is actually because, number one, the player boards look fantastic. Well, not necessarily look fantastic, but they're designed brilliantly because you're given the whole alphabet for each category all in front of you. So you have all of the information available to you at all times, which I love. And on top of that, the scoring system, I think the scoring system is brilliant. It doesn't try too hard to be creative in the way it scores. You're simply going to get points based on how many things you've got correct. And I must admit, as time has gone by, although I've played more and more deduction games, and deduction games are generally something I enjoy, I find myself leaning towards the simpler ones that don't rely on gimmicks or bells and whistles. You know, I think of games like the Search for Planet X, or games like Archaeologic. Although the deduction part of those games is fantastic, I feel like the little contraptions and things get in the way of the actual crux of the game and the fun of the game. Whereas my favourite deduction games are ones like this one, The Message from the Stars, games like The Lost Code, where it's, you know, the focus is all on the games and not, all on the deduction and not on the additional mechanisms to build up around that deduction. So this one, really smart game, some real crunchy, again, brain burnery decisions you have to make, or working out you have to do, and I'm thoroughly impressed. So that is A Message from the Stars at number 2. And finally, at number 1, I have SETI. Definitely one of the hits from 2024. Haven't really seen many bad reviews or feedback on this rather heavy and involved card-driven Euro. I wasn't so sure I was going to dive into this one because I thought it might be a little bit too heavy and too long for my collection, and I probably wouldn't get it played. But after hearing so much positive feedback, I thought, let's give this one a go, because I'm probably going to miss out if I don't. And it is number 1 here, so you can probably tell that I do like this game quite a lot, but I do have some issues with it, which hopefully I can explain now. So let's start with a bit of an overview of the game. So what you're trying to do is that you are launching these probes into space, landing on these different planets based on this really cool kind of universe system, where as the game goes on, just passively the board is going to rotate, which means the orientation of these planets is going to change and line up differently, meaning that the distance between certain planets and from the Earth is going to change around. It might take you longer or shorter to do certain routes. And once you've landed on these planets, you can either, again, land on the planet itself, or you can orbit the planet, which is a bit cheaper, get bonuses as you do. The bonuses are things such as, of course, money, you've got data, you've got these presents as well, where you are trying to compete for majorities in these different segments on the board. And that's probably my first nitpick of the game, is that I think the area majority thing, when it comes to scanning, it's called, and competing for the majorities of these little sections, I thought that was a little bit weak, although it's definitely worth doing, because of course you can you get data from it, which is another facet of the game, but you are often rewarded for, of course, being the majority presence in these regions, but it only cashes out once it's completed. And what that means is that you are kind of relying on the other players to partake in that part of the game as well. And I found over my games playing this, people would start quite enthusiastically competing for these regions, but as the game developed and people built up more of an engine of cards and things, it would be ignored and it kind of just faded into obscurity and nobody really touched it anymore. And when you had presence there already, it seemed like you wasted your previous efforts. Again, maybe that's just the way we played it as a group, but I definitely noticed it in each time I played this one. So that's one kind of small nitpick. Now, another thing you're trying to do is you're trying to build up your engine on your player board, which will make you more efficient at different actions. Again, gaining data, which is going to populate this different kind of strip on your player board. And an action is to cash it in order to gain, I think it's called like DNA, or kind of intelligence based on these 2 alien races that are going to be randomly determined for each game. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get 3 different types of, I think it's called DNA, and once you've done that, you're going to unlock the alien race, which will kind of throw a bit of make the game feel a bit different based on different rules, and you're essentially competing to get more of that DNA, to put more of your control markers down there to get points, bonuses, combos, and so on. So there's a lot of moving parts on to this game, but it's actually pretty simple to play, because all you're doing is you're either kind of launching a probe, landing, orbiting, or scanning essentially. But where the main fun of the game lies, at least for me, is in the card play. So this is definitely one of those multi-use card games where you can use these cards for, of course, multiple different reasons. Number one, of course, paying for those cards in order to get the benefit from them. And that could be like a little engine building benefit. So whenever you take a certain action, you get an improved version of it. It can be like a one-off benefit. It can be end-game objectives, so of course it'll give you something to aim towards. It can even be something like these little milestone objectives, where if you do something from that point on, then you'll gain a benefit and give you little boosts and so on. Now, if you don't want to use these cards for the kind of the main ability, you can just discard them for the corner ability that will give you like little boosts. So that could be like an extra bit of cash, or an extra data token, or even like free movement with your little probe that's going around the universe. So sometimes there is a bit of a dilemma on the cards you want to keep, which cards you want to get rid of, and you're even building up a bit of an engine, or like an income engine, where at the end of each round, based on cards you've tucked beneath your little player card, or your starting card, that will give you a boost of income at the start of each round, which again can be more like money, more energy, which is like a secondary currency, or even more cards, and so on. So again, lots of moving parts here, tons of strategy you can go for. You can kind of ignore certain parts of the game and just focus on other things. And yeah, it's definitely a feast for the senses. You're not going to find yourself bored with this one, because you're always kind of thinking of your next step, what you're going to do, how you're going to combo these cards, what actions you're going to prioritize, how are you going to move before the universe shifts, are you going to wait until the universe shifts so that you can be more efficient, and I even like the way that you can leave your probes in certain areas, and just like the board itself can kind of push you along into more optimal, or sometimes sub-optimal positions. So yeah, I think if you like your heavier Euros, especially if you like games like, I think, Underwater Cities, games like Ark Nova, I think this is going to be the sweet spot for you, this style of game. Again, lots of meat on the bones, clever combos, good card play, min-maxing everything, trying to squeeze everything out of the round. You can stay in the rounds and exhaust yourself if you want to. And it's quite interesting to see how much mileage you can get out of these cards to, again, do everything you can. So I don't really have many negative things to say about it, other than, again, I thought the competing for the majorities was a little bit weak, and most importantly, the game is rather long. So each time I played this one, it's taken around 3 hours to play, and although I wouldn't say it's outstayed its welcome, I would say that by the end of it, I was ready to move on. And these styles of games, I don't have that many opportunities to play them. And after the few times I've played this one, I feel like I've kind of seen what the game has to offer. I'm sure people will bounce back on that. But I feel like I've got the SETI experience, if that makes sense. I've enjoyed it. I've got a lot of value out of it. But is this a game I'm going to pull off the shelf regularly and choose this one over other kind of epic, larger, more grandiose Euros? Probably not. I would rather lean towards something like Civolution or something like Barrage. Those games just have like a bit more unique about them and a bit more engaging for me. Whereas this one, I'm really grateful I played it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I even recommend it to the right gamers. For me, the main issue is that I simply wouldn't play it, I think, and once a game's going to be sat on my shelf for a year or two before I play it, it just needs to move on, because we're drowned in so many games. But objectively, a fantastic design. I love the card play, and even generally speaking, I'm not a huge fan of sci-fi or space theme games. I think this game did a really good job of using that theme to the max, and especially the presence of the board. It looks awesome on the table. The way the planets shift around, it's just got a really nice table presence. And even some little additional wrinkles of the game I really enjoy, such as these milestones that you're hitting by going up the score track, which will let you invest in different end game scoring categories. And kind of the earlier you go to them, the better points return you get based on your own strategies that you're going for. So this game's probably more suited for a review when you can actually see everything, and a more in-depth style review. But I just wanted to share my overarching thoughts on the game, where it's a solid game. In fact, it's an excellent design, but it's one that's not quite right for me and my gaming group. And yeah, it just simply would not get played. But still, I think it's going to be really well regarded for a long time to come, because it's clearly a very well polished game. So that is SETI at number 1. So there we have it. That concludes the video. Hopefully you've enjoyed this one. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel, and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.